to move to vote on the intent to lay out public way for Olivia Knoll. So you each saw that the planning board met and recommended the outlay of Olivia Knoll. And with that, it comes to us. So I will entertain a motion on our intent.
I will make a motion to approve.
Second?
Hey, Scott. You're screen sharing. I don't know if you realize that.
Yeah, I'm
Or
tripping out
somebody's
right.
screen sharing. Are you screen sharing? Are you doing it on purpose? Oh, very good. Okay.
Oh, good.
Never mind, not you, Scott. Sorry.
I'm trying to pull up the agenda for
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll make a motion to approve based on the work that the planning board has done and their diligence in this process.
Very good. And we have a second.
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So everybody has approved it. All right. We'll move on to the consent items. There are 6 of them. I will go ahead and read them as per usual. Number 1 is to approve the meeting minutes from the regular meeting held on October 10th, 2023. Number 2 is to approve the meeting minutes from the regular meeting held on October 13th, 2023. Number 3 is to approve the meeting minutes from the executive session held on October 10th, 2023. Number 4 is to appoint Dave Bloom as a member of the CIPC to the DPW Building Committee. Number 5 is to sign the warrant for the 2023 special state election to be held on November 7th, 2023. And number 6 is to accept the disclosure of special municipal employee Diane McMorrow of her financial interest in a municipal contract with the Recreation Commission as required by General Law, Chapter 268A, Section 20D. Are there any objections to any of the consent items?
No, with the exception of it's the Recreation Committee.
Thank you. Are you correcting me from commission?
Yes, kind of, yes.
It's commission.
I think it's actually commission, but that's okay.
Was it really? So, okay. Well, if it's the Recreation Commission, then proceed.
Okay, so no other objections from anybody?
No.
All right, hearing no objections, I declare that all of them are approved. Under new business, the first is to review a request from the Capital Improvement Planning Committee to hold their meetings in the training room at the Public Safety Complex. You have the information, and my understanding is that both of the chiefs have signed off on this and approved it. And so we just need to go ahead and approve it unless there are any objections.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I second that, as long as there's communication between the capital and the public safety on the dates.
Right, so as per the policy, the training room is prioritized for public safety, but I think Mark already has the information on how to manage that, so we should be good. All right, so we have a motion, and a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Next is Heather
I
for.
didn't hear
sorry, go ahead.
Carol.
Yes, aye.
She said aye. Yep. So next is the FY24 first quarter budget review from Heather.
All right, so I won't spend too much time because, you know, it's only the first quarter, so we don't have a great deal of information, but we do have a little bit. What we did when I was looking at the revenues, I used the revenue projections that we had budgeted. Larissa doesn't update the revenue form until we actually submit the tax recap and get it approved, and then she'll put in her numbers. So I was looking at what we thought we were going to get for the year when we had originally done our budget versus what we've received thus far until September 30th. So far, revenues are looking pretty good. The most remarkable piece is probably our interest, right? Bank interest. We still budgeted conservatively last year, which was recommended by DLS as well, at $8,000. So far, we're already at 12.4. So we're looking pretty good on that. So, you know, as long as that continues to generate over the next couple quarters and the interest rates don't drop, we should be looking at some decent additional revenues coming in from that line, which is really nice. And we can always adjust FY25s accordingly, but still being conservative because you never know when the interest rate's going to drop. And that is a nice stimulant for some free cash right there.
I
we
believe
like-
the tax collector did make some adjustments on that. And that's probably why.
Yep,
Well,
yep.
I know
Oh,
the-
she did. She
yeah.
moved some money. She threatened to take money away if the banks didn't give her more interest.
Absolutely.
She's very aggressive. She's great.
Yeah.
But yes, total credit to Donna Kuchar on that one.
Yep.
Absolutely. Everything else looks like it's pretty good so far. We've collected about 250,000 in revenues. We know certain things don't come in yet, like the bulk of motor vehicle excise tax we won't see till the spring. Real estate tax, we've only had 1 quarter collection so far that's been dropped into the revenue sheet, so we'll see more after the end of December for the second quarter and get some of those additional numbers in there. Everything else is pretty good. Building permits right now are currently at 9.1 thousand or 37%, where we had estimated 25. Do note that in July we did increase our rates for a lot of things, and as I report on a monthly basis, you'll notice some of the permits are up a little bit higher. Right, we have a little more, like we had 3 new homes the last report I did for, I think that was September, I want to say. So people are starting to pick up a little bit on the building, and with the increased rates, we should start seeing a little bit more money come in on those, which is good, because if you remember last year, we were in a little bit of a panic attack where we barely hit the number that we had projected conservatively for building permits last year. So it's a nice, it's definitely a nice change on that to start seeing things pick up. Any questions on revenues? Okay, so like I said, we'll know more after the first half of the year. We'll have a better outlook of where we're at, but so far things are looking really nice on the revenue side, which is great. Expenses, I kind of broke things down here like I have in the past. I did some running over expenses to start. The first one are just the ones that are front loaded. Like we know we're gonna spend almost 100% of the budget day one, right? Regional planning assessment, town insurance, town clock, retirement assessment, those are all up front. Running higher than 30%, but front loaded costs. IT, we had purchase services that we had subscriptions from our prior carrier that we had to prepay because they had already paid for them, so we took care of those pieces. We had some equipment we purchased up front. Regional dispatch, the first half of the assessment. Wachusett assessments for the school. Debt and so forth. Running higher, things that we're actually going to keep an eye on, there's 3 of them right now. Street lighting, because the cost of electrical went up after we did our budget, we're already at about 33% for street lighting. Now, the good news is our total budget, I think, was about like 18,000. It still looks like if it continues in the same fashion, we're going to be about 6,000 higher than what we budgeted for this year for street lights that we'll have to address at a later point. But the good news is, 6,000's a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, 6,000's not that much. So we're kind of lucky that's a small line there. Waste collections are a little bit higher than they normally would be. And the question could be, some things could be front-loaded. Cheryl and I are continuing to monitor this on a monthly basis to make sure, remember, we charge everyone a flat fee every month for their trash collection. That doesn't mean they send out the same amount of waste every month. If they send out more and we end up paying more money through Wheelabrator, then it costs more money on that side. And then lastly, the cemetery commission. Again, luckily it's a tiny budget, so even though they're running high, they only have about a $6,800 budget to begin with. Right now they had about $1,800 of unplanned for expenses so far this year. And we did put an article forward to the select board for consideration for a special town meeting article to replenish some of those funds and get them back rolling again. Things not used to date are under 10%. No concerns though. Animal control, Rutland just hasn't sent us the invoice, and I think they're planning to send it to us in the next month or so. So they must not be hurting for the revenue for, our whole whopping, I think it's like $17,000, which is good. Good for them. Tree warden, we haven't, Kirk hasn't expended any money yet. Snow and ice, knock on wood, but we haven't even had to buy sand or anything to prepare at the moment. Our debt principal not excluded, we just haven't pulled from that line yet. Short-term interest and town report, which, Donna tends to wait until she has the report before she pays for it, so. Any questions on those expenses? So again, not too much to report yet. It's only the first quarter. Things are looking okay. Those are the only 3 accounts I mentioned that currently are running high to flag. The outside the general fund one is obviously the water department. Just to say a couple words on that, so their expenses this year have already exceeded where they normally would be at this time. They've had a lot of large water breaks, including on West Street, right? Large water breaks, multiple hours, off times of work, requiring details, parts, overtime, additional help, and so forth. We've had a series of water breaks at this point. At some point, there's the question of whether or not this trend is going to continue. But right now, if you took the current numbers of where we're at, it looks like we're going to need some more funds into the water budget to be able to make it through the fiscal, based on those numbers. But those are the things that are currently running high. We talked about what wasn't used. Any questions on any of that? Kirk, you all go with that?
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay, Mark, did you have any questions? Okay. And then internal transfers, I just reported here. You can also click the link if you want to see. Larissa has an Excel sheet on the website of any of the internal transfers. I only am reporting last month. If you want to see any before that or upcoming, you can check it out. There's only been a couple. I think we're up to like 4 or so right now as of September 30th. But we did transfer a small amount, about $125 from one IT line to another IT line to have enough to buy the 2 laptops, one for the assessor, one for the treasurer. And we also did they did a transfer already from cemetery supplies to purchase services for some of the headstone repairs in the amount of about $1,109.49. So again, complete list there. If anyone's interested, wants to track all of those pieces, they're right there for folks to view. That's all I have for the FY24 budget update so far. No questions? Okay, awesome.
No questions. Okay. So next is to approve the renewal rates for the retirees' health insurance for calendar year 2024. And you have that in your packet. So we're looking at our current rates, you can see, as well as the renewal rates. So we're looking at an increase of 4.5% for MedX2, 6.55% for BlueMed RX, and that makes that's the prescription coverage for MedX. And the total increase on the MedX side is 5.42%. And then for Managed Blue for seniors, this is our other option. We're looking at a 2.09% for the individual, 6.55% for the prescription coverage, for a total of 4.30% increase. Is there anything else that you need to add to that?
I don't think so. And just so folks at home wonder why we're talking about retiree health insurance now, we're on a calendar year cycle for the retiree health insurance where the municipal employees are on the fiscal. So that's why we're only talking about the retirees and why it seems like an interesting time of year.
And the retirees have all been informed of this increase because they have a representative on the committee, don't they? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll entertain a motion to accept the new rates for the retiree health insurance.
I'll make a motion
Second.
to accept.
Sorry. Second. Sorry.
That's okay.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Carol said aye. Okay. Very good. Moving on. So we need to review the warrant articles for the special town meeting to be held on November 20th, 2023. Heather sent out an updated warrant, which you should have. And she has up already. Perfect. So we're going to do this a little bit differently than we've done it in the past. In the past, we have reviewed every article and then voted on the wording of the article and then additionally voted on its placement on the warrant. This time around, I've been assured that we can vote on all of the articles as a whole at the end. And so I'm going to ask that Heather start running through the articles one at a time, and we can ask questions, make changes as we go, and then we'll vote on them as a whole at the end. Sound reasonable?
So if we
Yes, Madam Chair.
Sure, go ahead.
All I'm seeing is the agenda on the Zoom screen.
Oh, can you reshare?
Are. Okay, hold on.
Oh, that, very nice. Now I see Mark. And Donna.
What are you seeing now, Kirk?
Mark and Donna.
Oh, okay. And what are you seeing now?
Oh, that.
Now I'm seeing what we're talking about. Thank you
Awesome.
so much.
Perfect.
Fantastic.
And Carol, did you have something?
So if we've got any objections, we can discuss them as we go along?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Heather, let's talk about Article number 1.
So the water department met yesterday, and they did approve sending this over to the select board as written. So this is for the prior year appropriation. So remember, we did mention this at the end of the fiscal year. So in June, we got an additional bill for the Worcester Water Department. The bill included an amount that would put us over the approved amount for appropriations that was approved at the prior year's annual town meeting of $21,246.64. After talking to Larissa and Donna Kuchar, we had a conversation about this, about what to do. Because we could not expend more than what was already previously approved, we wanted to put this forward at the next special as a prior year appropriation. Because it's a utility, it gets a little wonky, right? Because the water department's not going to just let us carry forward a balance without charging us interest and so forth. And at some point, they would shut us off. So we did pay it when we got into this fiscal year, but we need to go back and remedy it so it's actually coming out of the appropriate fiscal year, or rather coming out of the appropriate funds. In this case, it would be retained earnings. So it's the transfer of $21,246.64 from FY24 water retained earnings.
Okay. Any questions or concerns about Article 1? Hearing none, can move on to Article 2.
Okay. Article 2. So as you know, in the revised version I sent this evening, I did change a couple articles and took a few things out. I just wanted to give the most updated information I had. So for this, it's revising the Cemetery Commission. So in conversations with Travis, he asked if we could put some additional money into the Cemetery Commission FY24 department budget that was approved at the annual town meeting on June 5th in Article 15. In the amount of $1,800. It was an expense that they had incurred this year that they weren't anticipating incurring. And at this point, without that additional money, they're going to run short for the year. I did talk to Brian Folk today, our legal counsel, and he is looking at a couple of these articles for changing potentially some of the lingo. But he's good with, whatever the board votes on the numbers and also the intent of each of the articles. So one of the things I had suggested earlier to Julia was that as we go through all of these, if everyone's okay with getting the articles to what they want, coming from the correct funding source, going to the correct purpose, then as long as the vote is contingent upon approval of legal form and legal counsel, then we're good to go. And he can make any of his minor changes relative to if I'm citing the right article or if he needs to word the article slightly different. Does that make sense? Everyone, okay. All right, that being said, any questions about this article?
So the $1,800 that you were looking for, we're in deficit, or we've used the funds up quicker than we would have hoped to, because we was doing restoration to gravestones. Is that correct?
I don't think it was restoration to
Well, that's
gravestones.
what's-
I thought it was fixing like the stone. Was it the stone wall, Julia?
Oh, the stone
You and
wall,
I had
they said-
talked about it.
All right, then I thought it was
It
the
wa-
stones.
It wasn't part of what they were planning to pay for at all. It was like an emergency expense. Now, that being said, they could always go to reserve fund instead, but again, the notion is, and the concern is, where we keep having things pop up, we want to make sure we're respectful of the funds available in reserve. And we want to make sure that those funds are there if we need them. So if there's another source to take them from at this time, we want to try to make things as whole as we can. Or at least that's my intent.
Yep. So we can't go to the cemetery revolving funds for
So
this amount?
when you say cemetery revolving funds, you mean the special revenue
funds,
accounts?
yeah.
So there's two special revenue accounts, right? There's the revenue accounts that's perpetual, expendable, and then there's the sale of cemetery lots. I reached out to one treasurer I knew, Donna Kuchar. I didn't want to bother her after hours, but we can always check with Donna Kuchar, and we can just change this to transfer from any available funds, and then we can look back when we do the motion and adjust it if that's the preference of the board. But the question is where we can actually pull it from.
I agree.
So, I mean, I'm okay with modifying and saying from any available funds, and then just letting Brian tweak that language and making sure that, we figure out where exactly we want to take it from and confirm where we can take it from.
Well, I think for town meeting, we want to know where we're taking it from, it has to be said. But I think we can consult with the town accountant. I think she'll be more than able to tell you if we can do that or not.
Okay,
'Cause
so,
I believe that there's one account that they can appropriate without town meeting, another one that needs town meeting approval.
okay. And, you
And
know, if
with
that's the
town
case, we
meeting.
can always pass over the article at town meeting
Or show the funding.
if they can fund it off-site, but, I added, for everyone's notice, well, you can see it, because it's on the board, isn't it? I added or any available funds and highlighted it so Brian can see I made
Yeah.
a modification. Does that,
I'm just trying to protect the free cash, that's all, and I know that
Understood.
finance will be thinking the same thing.
yep, totally understand.
Mark's already here, so I think he's already got his hand up.
Yep, go ahead, Mark.
I think, once again, I want to make a, a point clear. I'm only one member of the Finance Committee. And all of these articles are going to need to go before the Finance Committee for their vote. But if I can make an overview comment about Articles 2 through 7, I would just set the stage for the Select Board that I think that the Finance Committee is going to have a difficult time with all of those. Don't want to get ahead of myself because they could have a different posture than I'm sharing with you right now, but I don't want to throw away my 15 years of experience of thinking and predicting what's likely to happen.
So in what regards, Mark?
I think the issue of free cash is going to strike a nerve. So one of the thoughts is for amending this is to take the heading free cash out of play, because if you say other sources in the text, it doesn't eradicate the header, which is free cash. And as Ross Perry just said, he did his homework. If you add all these 7 articles, that's spending $54,000 of free cash. And what we're trying to be mindful of is using too much free cash to balance the FY25 budget, but we certainly don't want to spend it in FY24 before we get there. So I think that there's going to be a lot of difficulty with a lot of these. I can't tell you to eliminate all 5 of them, but as a starter, I think the header has got to be changed a little bit. We've actually spoken just recently at a CIPC meeting where we have funding recommendation for one of these. I don't want the entire rest of the meeting just to be about my points on these 5 articles. I'm just letting you know, I think it's going to be difficult. I would hate to have the Select Board recommend approval and then have the Finance Committee not recommend the funding source or not recommend the article at all. Ideally is to take this draft to the Finance Committee and then come back to the Select Board, but I know timing's not going to allow that. I just don't want to be sitting here tonight and say nothing and then come back in 2 weeks and we have a completely different view of what you've discussed. I'm just letting you know, I think we're going to have a different view of these.
And the one we're presenting tonight is different to probably what you've seen, because
I'm sorry, Carol?
the articles are different now than what you've probably seen. This is a new one that came out around 6 o'clock today.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had the one I downloaded on Monday, so.
Yeah, this is different.
This is
So
different.
the amount is different to what you just quoted.
Yeah.
But just as an example, the Finance Committee is gonna say, hey, we reviewed your budget for FY '24 3 months ago, and if everybody comes to us because they now realize in October that they're gonna incur expense that they didn't think that they were gonna incur back in April, we'd be here every week changing, this particular item, or all the items. So my point is, let's see if they have $1,800 worth of savings in another line item in the remaining 8 months of the fiscal year, and if not, then let's take it out of reserve. But to change a budget that we've already approved and town meeting has approved, only a couple of months into the fiscal year, I think it's a bad policy.
I share some of your sentiments, but I think sometimes there's things that change after we've approved a budget. But I agree with what you're saying. I don't like to rob Peter to pay Paul. That's how I see it. So
I think the concern, though, too, Mark, is, we're trying not to, or my goal is not to deplete the reserve fund in November, right? So all of these things, that 1,800, not anticipated, emergency expenditure, they could totally qualify based on the general laws and go to reserve fund for $1,800 transfer. Everything else, most of these things are gonna fall under that same category, but the idea is not to deplete the reserve fund. And, I would say Division of Local Services would support the concept that free cash is really meant for one-time expenses, and these are one-time expenses. So it falls under that category very clearly, that's, what the legislative intent is of those funds.
great. Come, carry
Okay.
on. Carry on.
All right, so we've addressed Article 2 and identified a possible alternative funding source. We'll move on to Article 3. So this is with regard to elections and registrars. Go ahead.
Yep, similar thing to the last one, so pertaining to the FY24 budget. So when we did the budget, or got the budget finalized, approved, I do not believe we knew when or any of the details pertaining to Ann Goby's open vacant seat relative to the state senate. That cost us for the primary about $3,200 and is expected to cost about the same for the state election in November. That's about $6,000, probably a little bit more than that Lori did not plan to expend, and as a result is going to cause a hardship in her budget. Now, we talked about the potential of waiting until May and hoping that we didn't expend so much of it that we couldn't do any line item transfers in to help, because remember, we have the annual town election and town meeting.
Yeah.
Right? But the problem is we still have the presidential election, which is going to be the large bulk of the expenses. So I think it's going to drain more than what she has. Again, reserve fund, totally an option, up to the select board on how you want to proceed. But this is our current suggestion of trying to get ahead of this and, again, making things whole.
So why the public building budget and not the town clerk's?
Because I wrote the wrong one.
Okay. All
How
right.
about the election and registrars one?
Okay.
I didn't even see
So
that.
so it's not public building then.
Right.
That's a good catch, Carol.
So that should be the
It's
town
resolved.
clerk's budget.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Elections registrars. So we separate still town clerk versus elections and registrars.
Okay.
That's why.
Good. So we have that. Okay.
All right, any questions on that one?
Is it reasonable to, based on what you just said,
Yep.
is it reasonable to expect that there could be a potential for $6,000 to be left over at the end?
I don't think so.
To
I
cover
think when I'm talking line item transfers, I don't think we're anticipating line item transfers within that department. I'm thinking we'd pull it in from a different line that was unused. We budgeted, if you review her budget for next year, like we calculated to the penny, to the best of our ability, based on how many hours training, how many people for each of those pieces, early voting numbers. If supplies coming in a little bit less, maybe there's a little left. But even the 6,000 is a conservative number. We spent 3,200 for this past election.
Yep.
And this past election, half of the poll workers she had sent home because it was so quiet she didn't need them.
Yep.
So assuming that the state election November is going to be a little busier because it actually counts for the marbles, I don't know if she's going to be able to do that. So I think her numbers are, even though she's saving on coding, I think her numbers are still going to be a little bit higher than that. So I don't think the 6,000 is going to cover the total cost between the two.
Okay.
We just thought the 6,000 would get us to the point where she was whole enough to get to the May 1st race line.
Okay. And what percentage of reserve would that deplete if we waited and took it out of reserve?
15%.
So remember, we only have, what, 40,000, Mark? So and everything would chip away, right?
Okay. Okay.
I think it's a legit request. You know, didn't know about this additional election, so
I shy away from such a, I say a large chunk, and that's sort of relative to what you're talking about, but large in relation to 40,000 that we have available in reserve. 6,000's a fairly significant piece of that, and so I hate to
agree.
deplete reserve by that
Yeah.
much.
yeah, I see what you're saying. I agree with what you're saying.
Okay. Kirk, do you have any feedback on Article 3?
No, but I do agree that I mean, that's a big percent of the total budget, so,
Yeah.
I mean, we need to think about that.
Yeah. You mean for reserve, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
and this next election cycle for the national election, it's gonna be probably pretty interesting, so we need to consider that as well.
Right.
I'd hate for Laurie to have to worry about it.
Yep. I agree, and she would worry about it. Yep. So, okay.
Are you good with that one?
So good with that one. Yep.
So the next one we put here, I put here the transfer fund interim town administrator. So again, $12,000. Apparently I didn't finish my sentence, which is always exciting. Town administrator, we'll
Yep.
put that there.
Yeah.
But I tried to guess a number of where it would be, remembering that, my budget has, I think, even after my salary, still like an extra 1,000 or so in it. And trying to give some wiggle room, but giving a number that we could probably balance out somewhere along the line. And again, in order to hire someone, we need to have the funding available. So whether it's from free cash or transfer from somewhere else or reserve fund,
Right.
we really should have the money before the select board considers signing a contract.
Right. Agreed.
I think
Remember-
I think we owe it to the candidates, whether we choose to have that money in place.
Absolutely. Yeah. So remember Ross had talked about potentially having some overlap time. I think that's probably a good idea. Would this number need to go up in order to accommodate that, or is that,
Depends on which candidate you're interested in and what the total balance is. I was trying to
yeah.
ballpark in the middle, and still at the end of the time, if we get to the end of the year and there's a little bit less in the TA line, we can do a line item transfer in
Yeah.
from a different department if we need to. But I wouldn't plan on a large enough,
Right.
I wouldn't plan leaving this much vacant. I think we're already seeing this year that budgets are going to be spent tighter because they're much tighter balance in the first place, and we're
Right.
having unexpected expenses pop up.
Right. Okay.
So I have a question.
Yep.
Would we want to consider a week prior to, well, if we have a week prior to her departure and a week upon a return as a school up, school downs, kind of buffer?
Right.
Should we
Understanding
plan
that,
on 2 months or 2 months and 2 weeks?
right. That's
don't think-
that's the
I
kind
don't
of the
think it'll
question.
take a full week either side, personally.
Right. And well, and honestly, we're only budgeting 19 hours a week, so really it's not a full week anyways, on either side, but yeah, if it's, 2-3 days, whatever, on either side. I mean, it makes sense to me for continuity.
We can put that
Absolutely.
number, whatever the select board wishes to put that number at.
Okay. What was the average request?
You're going
Ish.
back on my memory. I don't think I can pull that up without.
All right, I'm gonna just
Disagreed.
do a little quick math. Hang on, bear with me.
Thought it was $65 to $100.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're about there. So I'm just gonna do this.
What did you say? What did
I'm
you
just
say?
gonna
Mark?
go with
Repeat that.
$100.
Can you repeat that?
You said 65 to 100 was what. he
That was
thought
the hourly
range.
rates that were coming in. Hold on. So we're really looking at more like 15. Understanding that there's still a little wiggle room in the town administrator line item potentially. But I think personally, I would probably feel more comfortable putting it at 15 just to be safe. And then if
I agree.
there's less that, if we don't have to expend it all, then even better, then it can go back.
I mean, by that time, we may be able to change it on the town floor,
Yep,
as long as we don't increase it.
right. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so maybe we'll go up to 15 on that. Does everybody kind of agree?
I do.
Okay.
But between now and the town meeting, we'll look at that a little bit better because we'll have probably
We'll have better
negotiated.
idea, right, so we can always change it as we get closer to town meeting. We
Okay.
can always change it on the town meeting floor if we have a better number in place at that point. And to Carol's point, we can always go down, but we can't go up, so. Okay. Article 5, this is for the public safety generator repairs.
Yeah, so what we've discussed a couple times in the past meeting, I think it's just one meeting, and it could be two, I'm losing track at some point. This topic seems to be around for a while. So the costs we're looking at right now, we originally ended up renting a generator to cover us. I think the initial rental was like 6,800. It looks like we're gonna potentially have to do a second month because the parts may not be in, so that's like around 12,000 between the 2 months of rentals. Then you have a couple thousand for people coming in to assess the actual generators, right? So round that up to about 15,000. The actual contract awarded was about 11,000. So you're looking around, was that 26,000, give or take? We do have a tiny bit of wiggle room of money that's unaccounted for, right? Like some inspections that we did, there's inspections in that budget, there's other things in that budget, but it also includes general repairs for the public building and so forth. So there is a little wiggle room. I don't think we have to add more money to that budget to the exact penny. We've also been able to transfer a little money in from the building custodian line that was unused the first quarter, around the tune of about 3,000. So trying to put a little bit back into that line where we can. That being said, if we don't add more money to that line, or alternatively, if the fire department or the public safety building line, someone representing it, does not go to reserve fund to replenish the account and add more money to that account, we're gonna have trouble paying for regular repairs and inspections we need for the building. So the idea here is not to purchase, it's not for the actual generator cost, it's simply to put the money back into the line as a result of having to pay for the repairs that were unanticipated. Now, again, theoretically speaking, the repairs are unanticipated, they totally fall under the law, and we could totally go to the reserve fund, and that should be a covered cost. But that would deplete half to two-thirds of the reserve fund, again, in November.
Right.
So the idea here is where we have the ability to kind of make this whole, and again, put everyone in the best situation possible, my recommendation would be to seek some portion of the funds that we just expended to refill that line and be able to have additional money to move forward.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the majority of that budget is already tied up in contracts and whatnot, so
Yep.
there's already bills that we are expecting.
Yep, so there's already, just like any building, right, there's already inspections you have to, do on an annual basis that you're required by law to do. There's already things we have to cover, like, making sure our HVAC system works, and so forth. So there's only so much that's just the flex, like, oh, that happened.
Right, right.
And, this would still require us to use some of that, what happened? Money. But this would make us so that we could cover everything else we need to get done with the building and make sure that the building is maintained to the extent we can for the year.
Okay.
So how much have we spent so far on the interim, the rental of the generator, and how much do we anticipate on the
So we
rental?
spent approximately 6,800-ish for the first month.
And we've got another
And
6,800 to come as well.
Yeah, we know it's gonna be about another 5,000 some change for the second month, because the part's taking longer than we anticipated. I mean, maybe it comes in less than that, but as of right now, we're anticipating having to pay that second month.
I spoke with the
Contract
fire chief
itself.
today.
I'm sorry,
spoke with
Kirk,
the fire
what?
chief today. I spoke with the fire chief today,
Yep,
and he thought it was gonna be around an additional 5,800.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then we have the contract itself, assuming, there's no additional parts, no additional labor, is 11,000 for the repair. And then add to that the couple thousand we had to pay for people to come out and look at the generator, diagnose, and try a couple things. So that's where it's coming up with the approximate 27K for the whole thing said and done, hopefully.
And we're only asking for 20.
Asking for 20, because I think there's a little flex in there, and like I said, we can put in a little money, any money that's left over from underutilized custodian hours. since it's in that same departmental bucket, we can move it in, and we did already. We moved in about 3,000. So we're trying, but I'm hesitant to do it in advance until we know, like, if projects start picking up and so forth, and we get up to the actual budgeted time, I would be concerned
Right.
that we move those funds, so.
Right. Okay. So I think we're again in the same situation where this is a large amount that would really deplete our reserve fund. And so, it's just very similar to the registrars. I see it anyways. Any other thoughts on that?
It's a chunk of change out of the free cash, I believe.
Yeah.
We haven't got a crystal ball to see if we're going to need the reserve fund later on in the year. Mm-hmm. But it's to use the free cash and then have the reserve fund available, and we're not going to have that available until 25, 26. I'd like to do a little bit of each, but I don't know. Especially as it's even over what we're requesting, so I don't think we've got
Mark,
much
do you,
choice.
do you have any comment on that?
I think you think same
Of
as
course
me.
I do.
You can see his facial expression, can't you?
Even though the Finance Committee has been the guardian of the reserve fund, I don't have it with me, I don't think, but if you looked at a 10-year analysis of it, we've only spent about half of it every single year. We keep holding for that catastrophe that fortunately has not happened. So it seems to us that the 40 grand has been adequate. The other thing is, and I'm not sure I heard Carol correctly, so if you just said it, I want to give you credit for it, and I just didn't hear it correctly, but capital depreciation has $52,000 in it. It should have $552,000 in it. So if we use 20 of it and it's depleted down to 32, it takes care of this particular issue, it funds it, it's an emergent nature, we gotta take care of it, and just let's work toward rebuilding the capital depreciation fund in future years. But right now, it's sitting there, keeping in mind that every time we take money away from free cash, that's less that we can use to balance the budget, which means that there's gonna be another deeper cut somewhere along the line because we have less free cash, or heaven forbid, there's gonna be an override, then it's gonna be higher because we've used the free cash for FY '25 and FY '24. So why not go to a resource that we have that's sitting there, and 52 is not doing us any good, so who cares if it's 32? And
So would
let's
your
get it fixed.
recommendation, as an individual, understanding you're here as, not as the whole capital committee, but would your recommendation be to try and get the funding from capital instead of free
Yes.
cash?
I would probably speak to that point at the Finance Committee,
Yeah, okay.
and they're all individuals, they have their own thoughts, but I think it would get some support. It may not be unanimous support, but I think we only need 4
Yeah,
to be the case. I think they would lean toward that, particularly if they don't have to make a $20,000 cut, in 3 months on somebody else's budget because of this, because we use free cash.
right. And so I
Nobody's
guess,
arguing that it needs to be done. It's
Yeah,
gotta
right,
be
right.
fixed 10 days ago.
yep.
It's
And
just,
Second-
how do we
second.
fund it?
Sorry.
Hold on, Carrick, let me just ask a follow-up. So the question then becomes logistics, because there's some issues around timing and having to, because there's an RFP involved, we have to lay out the account that the money comes out of. How would that work for money coming out of capital? Is that possible?
I think that's perfectly fine. So
Okay.
we already signed the contract, right? The contract says that we're paying out of the public safety building account. If it's like a what do you call it, journal entry.
Yeah.
Okay,
She would just do a journal, if we appropriate it, like, let's say all of a sudden we have a special town meeting and this was this, Article 5, and funding shows up for $20,000. She would just take $20,000 of the expenses and pull them from that account. The purpose of citing the account number in the contract is to secure and say to the vendor,
we have
and also from the
adequate-
town, we have the money and here's where we're planning to pull it from.
Okay.
Here's where we currently have the money.
Yep,
Now, if the money moves, they don't care.
right,
And once they get paid, they don't care what our journal entry said.
right. So I guess then the next question is, how does that, if we've already paid for the repairs by the time we get to town meeting, how do you then allocate the money?
Before we got to that stage, I think the town accountant needs to be involved because she's
Okay.
going to have to do the work. And I hear what Heather says, and I know what she's saying. But I would still like to see the town accountant's input because she's going to have to do that at the end of the year when she does the recap and show where she's taking the funds out for FY
Right,
24. So
because really, it would need to just go back into that account
that's why I would like.
as opposed to paying for the purchase directly.
That's why I would like to
Yeah,
hear what the town accountant has to say.
right,
And I appreciate the offer for the capital. I mean,
Absolutely.
thinking outside the box.
yep,
I was thinking more like so much from reserve, so much from free cash. But I think, again, as long as we've got this as a placeholder, we can always change the funding on town meeting floor.
that's true. That's
As long
true.
as we all agree that 20,000 is the sum and no more.
And where it's gonna go to.
Because we don't
Yeah.
want to leave the public safety account without money at the end of the year because they've got their contracts in place. And as Heather said, all these budgets are tight. There's no extra money. They've
Yeah.
worked on them to the penny. So
Right.
as long as, and I think that's what Mike was saying at the last meeting, the fire chief, he was saying
Yep.
he wanted to make sure he got the money
Right, yep,
available. So
completely agree.
are you okay with that, Mark, for us to look into all sources?
Yeah. Okay. Kirk, did you have something too?
I did, as a follow-up to Mark for the capital and the finance committee. Is there a fund, earmarked emergency funds for situations such as this, or should there be?
Reserve.
That's what the reserve is for.
The reserve fund.
Yeah. And that's
So-
what Mark just said as well.
But we would deplete it.
But the
I
problem,
didn't hear what he said, so I apologize.
Yeah.
yep, he said the reserve fund. The problem we're running into though is that we only have 40,000 in the reserve fund and this would take
No, I know.
half of it. Yeah.
So Mark was offering up the capital depreciation fund.
So yeah,
It's a
did you
source.
did you hear Mark when he said we could consider capital as a funding source instead?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So the accounting issue is have the public safety building department pay for it right away and then withdraw the money from the capital depreciation to reimburse and replenish that fund.
Right.
It's already been paid. Some of it's already been paid.
Yeah.
Well, been
Probability
paid.
is by the time we get to town meeting,
Town
most of
meeting.
it will already
Yep.
be paid
Right.
Yep.
for.
Right.
And then reimburse that budget.
Right.
Yeah, but
And we
let's
just want to make sure the town accountant's okay with
comfortable with that.
yeah, with doing it that way. But I would be fine with that.
I
think
added
that's
or
a-
any available funds.
Okay.
And
I'll
Yeah.
probably just make a note to Brian and say, just make all finance articles or any available funds. So it covers all, and then you guys, the board can change things however they wish when they get to town meeting. I was just trying to make things clear up front,
Yep.
but I will retract my effort.
And that's what we like. We like to see the source of it. But like I say, sometimes
Yeah, we do like to see the source. Right. So if we know, it should be
Free
there.
cash is 2 four-letter words. It's kind of our message.
I like that. All right.
So Article 6 here, we did have some conversation with the Capital Improvement Committee tonight. But again, if you remember at the annual town meeting, we voted to move some money from capital depreciation fund for 1/3 of the cost. Recreation was willing to front 1/3 of the cost, and cemetery department was gonna front 1/3 of the cost. When they further examined their budget, they didn't feel like they had the funding and any of their sources of funds to utilize for this. Conversation this evening was potentially looking at, again, the sale of cemetery lots, if that can be accessed at a town meeting. They have the perpetual care that can be encumbered, but that's only like $5,000. That would wipe out the entire additional source right there.
Yeah.
So again, I can put, or any available funds. We can look into some of those options. Mark had suggested, or Capital had talked about this evening, I think they even voted, to potentially take it out of the capital depreciation fund as the last third of the 2/3 of the prior approved capital mower.
Yep.
Did I capture that right?
Yeah, we were just trying to be consistent, because the other 1/3 that was voted on at town meeting came out of capital depreciation. So now we have new information, so why not have the second third follow the same venue?
And I would like to see a conversation with the town accountant to see if we can take it out of the account 2216.
Yep. Right.
It's a small
See if
amount, but also let commission, conservation, cemetery
Cemetery.
know that what we're thinking.
Right.
We want them to have this mower, so
Yep.
All right, all good on that one?
So two
Yep.
potential alternatives there. Okay, good.
And again, I highlighted or any available funds, which I'll just tell Brian, put that on all finance articles, but it will be good. All right, water enterprise. So water department receipts. So Travis and I met with the water commission last night, reviewed the current budget, went through all the expenses. As I mentioned previously, we had a lot of water breaks already thus far this year. Our expenses are running much higher than we had originally thought. We broke down the entire budget, looked at each of the things based on prior years, looked at where we landed at the end of FY23, looked at FY24. One of the big expenses is actually the amount of money we pay to Worcester Water, right? Water from Worcester. Last year, we ended the year at a number, it will be even higher because we didn't account for that prior year appropriation bill, right? Because we didn't pay it last year, so it didn't show up in the expenses paid. That number is well higher than what we had budgeted this year. And then in addition to that, they went up in their rates the year before by 1 cent per cubic foot. This year they went up by 10 cents per cubic foot.
Oh.
And then lastly, if you remember, we're gonna be draining the water tank at about 500,000 gallons. We have to pay for that water. So that's an additional expense that is going to increase those numbers. So with all those pieces taken into consideration, account going over pretty much every single line item of the budget, with the water commissioners, they were in agreement that the total expenses look like they're going to be higher than what we had originally budgeted, so we wanted to modify this article. This was a concern that we've had since about July 1, give or take, even a little bit before then. And as the numbers continue to develop into September, there's more concern that was raised. So in order to increase the rates, you have to make sure you have enough revenues to meet them. In lots of discussions relative to the revenues, the board came up with two pieces. Number one, using some of their retained earnings. So if you remember, usually every year they put aside about $107,000 retained earnings for the Asna Bumskit debt. Next year, the debt goes down to $21,000. There's also the prior year appropriation bill that's up a little further, that's again in the 20,000s. So that leaves, I don't know, what is that, like 70,000, give or take, left in that line for retained earnings. What they wanted to do, they didn't want to wipe out entire water retained earnings, so we agreed at a modified number, 47,717, to help balance the budget. And then the rest of it was departmental receipts. So we've known since the beginning of July that we need to raise our rates in some way, and we wanted to do it very thoughtfully. If anyone at home is bored, you can notice that we have 5 categories of rates: residential, commercial, institutional, sprinkler, and municipal. And most of those categories each have 3 tiers. So if you use up to 7,800 gallons or 7,500 gallons as a residential user, you pay a rate of $8, I think it's 98 cents, and then 2 more decimal points per 1,000 gallons. And then if you go above that, you pay a higher rate, and if you go above 15,000 gallons a month, you pay an even higher rate for each section of those portions. It's very hard the way it is currently to be able to actually predict out and budget out those numbers, but we want more time to be more thoughtful in the analysis. The one thing that's the easiest thing for us to be addressed initially, because we can count on it, it's a flat, is going to be the meter rate. So if anyone who gets a water bill sees part of their thing, they have a flat meter rate. Everyone is currently charged, regardless of what type of user you are, $21.45 a month. What the water commissioner discussed is a different set of numbers of increasing that so that we can start collecting more revenues for next fiscal, or for this fiscal year starting in January. We wanted to do it so we had enough time to give people notice, but also collect 6 months of revenues. So collecting them, even with the idea of about 90% collection rate for first time, we go out to bill, we're looking at approximately an additional $40,000 additional. If you remember last fiscal, we balanced the budget, I think, 1 million, it was like 46,000 or 43,000 some change. This brings us up to 1,087,316 from departmental receipts, and then the balance from retained earnings. That rate that they decided on, they voted on last night, was to raise the rate from, $21.45 to $27 a month for the meter fee. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions?
Nope, I have none. Kirk?
No.
No, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm gonna move on to the next article if everyone's good.
Yep, go ahead.
All right, so the next article, contracts. So if we contract in Massachusetts, as a municipality for beyond 5 years with the vendor, or beyond 3 years, we have to get approval at town meeting. So this is just complying with that. We want to do the Pitney Bowes machine for 5 years because it's cheaper than doing it for 3 years. Pitney Bowes machine is our postage machine. And this is just a template article from another community. Brian's gonna take another peek at it to make sure it looks good, but otherwise, under Chapter 30B, Section 12B, this allows town meeting to give the authority to us to be able to enter into the 5-year agreement instead of 3 years, so we're saving more money. Does that make sense, everyone? Any questions?
No questions here?
Non-monetary. It's a non-monetary article.
That's in here. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Article 9, the public way acceptance for Olivia Knoll. Brian, again, is going to take another look at the language. I pulled it from another community, but it may not be the perfect fit of what we need to have in the article, because depending on how you lay out the road and how it comes about and so forth, it might be presented a little bit different. But this is the essential draft of it, essentially accepting the layout plan of Olivia Knoll as the board keeps voting. Voted initially, send it to the planning board voted to send it back to the select board. Select board voted on their intent again tonight. So this is the last vote in the series of votes. Any questions?
I have none.
Okay. The next one. So this is something I've been talking about for a while. It's still my recommendation. It's totally up to the select board whether we proceed now, future, or ever. But the idea is establishing a trash enterprise fund, right? We talked about this previously. The idea would take all that money and kind of put it into its own financing, so you can see everything coming in, see everything going. If it raises additional revenues beyond, they wouldn't roll to the town general fund. They would stay in that fund, and we'd be able to use them to either offset future rates or be able to, maybe someday purchase bins for people or do curbside pickup or use it for some kind of recycling program or so forth, but give back to that program, keep that fund whole. While we do benefit periodically in the event that we pull in more revenues and expenses that we have for trash, we could also get burned in the event that we expend more than we brought in revenues, right? So this kind of removes that piece a little bit, makes it a little bit safer for the general fund, so you don't have to worry about that piece. And it's also nice because it gives back to the program. So it allows the trash money coming in to stay specifically for the trash and recycling program, so we can keep the rates stabilized or give things back to the people which is everyone in town who uses trash services.
Can I just say something? I don't personally think we need this. We haven't had a deficit in that account, for many years that I am aware of, and I just don't think we need it. It's another piece of accounting that goes to the accountant to do extra work. So I would like to not have this go forward. That's my opinion.
Kirk, do you have any thoughts about the trash enterprise fund?
I guess my biggest question is what's the benefit and what's the liability?
There's no real liability, Kirk. It's just like I say. I just don't think it's necessary. That's all. We've had this fee in place for at least, I would say, 19 years, and it hasn't been a problem being in the local revenues. And I have had discussions with the treasurer and the accountant, and they almost agree with me. So.
Heather, same question.
So I concur with Carol on the liability part. There's not really any. It separates it out, so it takes it out of the general fund on both the revenue and expense side. There's still going to be, similar estimates as anything, right? Like we have to figure out the Pellegrino contract for next year, and then we're always estimating Wheelabrator, which is the amount it costs us to dispose of trash. It does reduce the risk that, in the event that we're throwing away more stuff than we're actually charging people for, or costs of things go up higher. It also benefits where instead of the money people sending in for trash, if the revenues exceed the expenditures, instead of it rolling to the general fund as free cash, it would stay in the trash fund. So it could help alleviate or keep rates more stable by allowing the money to offset it, because it would be retained earnings similar to the water side. It also would allow for the program to potentially be able to expand, whether it's eventually buying receptacles for people, or whether it's adding additional curbside pickup, or, leaf pickup, whatever it is that you can fall under that category. So it just puts the money back into that piece, and keeps it a lot cleaner. And also allows, again, the benefit, like if you're paying money in for trash, your money is staying in the purpose of trash and not going to roll over to the general fund.
Carol, do you have an idea of what the additional lift is for our people to do this?
Well, it's not gigantic, but they'd have to separate that and it being a separate account, and then at the end of the year they'd have to do that separate.
Balance it, yeah.
At the moment it's a local revenue, it goes into local revenue. But like I say, I personally don't think it's necessary, and like I say, our employees don't think it's necessary. And if trash fees, the cost of disposing of trash goes up, then we can reflect that in the trash fee. I think we all agree that what we're getting for our money is more than most towns.
Fantastic, yeah. Yep, totally agree.
Because, you go in other towns, our neighbouring towns, and you're paying probably twice, 3 times as much as we're paying. So there's a lot of leeway we've got. So I think I think we're fine as well, personally. That's my personal opinion.
I could definitely go either way on this. We have functioned just fine the way we have it. I see the benefit of doing it, where we protect the general fund from an over expenditure, but my understanding is that we've not seen that occur. It's a tough one,
It really is.
We don't have to do it at this meeting. We could do it at the annual town meeting if we wanted to
we
discuss it
absolutely
more.
could. Yep.
The
Yep.
benefit of doing it now versus annual, though, is that it sets us up for the budget cycle, right? If you do it annual, you could do it annual, but you wouldn't be able to put it into effect till the following fiscal year.
like
If you
I said-
did it now for the fiscal year,
Yeah.
we would pull it out of the budget revenue, budget expenses right away,
Yep,
and then we'd be set up for annual town meeting.
I agree. But like I say, we've gone this long. I don't think another year would make a difference.
Well, until it makes a difference.
But like I say, Kirk, if trash goes up, then we can, as the select board, account for that additional trash by increasing the fee. And we've still got a long way to go compared to other towns for how much people pay.
Did you have something further, Kirk?
No.
So I'm going to ask for a consensus on keeping it or revisiting it annual town meeting. Kirk, how do you feel?
I'm leaning toward keeping it.
And you've already heard what I say no.
Yeah, I if it's not something that's urgent, I think I'd rather address it at an annual town meeting rather than a special. I don't think there's an urgency to having it for this budget cycle. As Carol mentioned, we have a whole nother year. We would have another year before it got implemented, but we don't expect that anything's going to change in that period of time, especially where we just recently
Increase them.
increased the trash fee and renewed that contract. So,
And I would agree with that
Okay.
because we'll probably get more community participation,
correct. Yep.
and that's like the key right there.
That's exactly where I'm headed with it. Yep. So, so if it's something that's not urgent, I like to put it on an annual. That way, you've got more people there and you're asking more members of the community to get their vote and agree to it. So, okay.
All right, so I took that off.
Okay.
All right, so we're good with that?
Yep.
All right, Wachusett School Regional Agreement amend. So again, remember the Wachusett Regional School District had submitted an amendment to the current agreement, changing the number of people and votes and the counts and so forth.
Yep.
So I did attach that here and alluded to it again. Brian will take a look at it. One of the other communities, I think, is holding off on it for right now, but that being said, I'd like to just get this out of the way. So they can move forward, either it passes or it doesn't pass, but at least we can get back to the school and say, hey, you asked us to put this on, we put this on, and here you go. I know one community's not putting it on because they're not having a special.
Right. Yep. And that
But-
makes sense. I have no problem with the change that's being requested. It's merely, reflecting what's already written in the regional agreement, and we're just changing a number of a representative in one member town. So, no issue there for me.
Carol, are you okay with that?
I'm okay if the other towns are okay with it.
Well, and
Kirk?
I agree.
Yeah.
all right, so we'll leave that where it is. And then bylaws, so originally had 3 on the original draft. The first was the Council on Aging bylaws. We did get a red line version back from Brian today. I did communicate that over to Anita and to Cindy to see what they wanted to do with it. So one of the I wouldn't say major concerns, but one of the major conflicts in the document was that it seemed to have a lot of conflicting pieces with the Special Government Act 2013. So I think what originally happened is when we came across this bylaw a couple months ago, the original documented date we checked today was 2010, right? So that preceded the Special Governmental Act, and I think when they went back to look at it a few weeks ago, they weren't thinking that there was some major piece of legislation the town did that they had to go back even further. So Brian pointed out those pieces. I think that will be super helpful for them. I told them I'd be available for them to come to any of their meetings if they wanted to talk about any of the language or so forth, and they're looking to put it on to the annual town meeting once they review those recommendations.
Okay. So that's off.
And then the second piece, I did actually just hear from Travis about an hour ago because he had already left the office for the day. Good news, he's okay with it. So one of the things we ran into was the Massachusetts water, whatever the state water works is. It's not coming to me, Carol. I can't think of the name of it. So Travis had talked to them. One of the things we wanted to be able to do on the water side was we still have some folks who are resistant to allow us into their homes to be able to install meters. And one of the things that's in our rules and regulations says that we're able to go in and shut off someone's water if you're not going to allow us to put the meter in. When we checked with Mass Water Association, or whatever they are, they said that we cannot do that unless the rules and regulations are adopted in some way or referenced in a bylaw. So we had Lori look, we didn't currently have any bylaw that referenced the rules and regulations. If you remember the Conservation Commission wetland bylaw, they reference rules and regulations in their bylaws, say how they're adopted. But you don't have to put the rules and regs before the town, you just, go ahead, follow that process, and you can amend those. So because we don't have something that links those two pieces together, we put it out to Brian. Mass Waterworks, they did send us to a couple other towns, including like one that was you saw it on the list, it was very one sentence of, the water department shall have rules and regulations. We weren't sure if that was gonna be sufficient, so Brian's looking into what we actually need to have, so that won't be ready till annual.
Okay.
Okay.
We weren't able to turn something around fast enough, and if we had a better example from another community other than the state, the waterwork, whatever, Massachusetts telling us to go search everyone's bylaws. It's just one of those things when you tried Googling it, I wasn't getting any luck. So, okay. That being said, so the last one I have on here, totally up to the select board on how you guys want to proceed. But one of the things when I was reviewing the capital plan from 2018 from Collins Center, I noticed that there was a reference to putting money aside each year for septic system issues and so forth. Well, if you know, as we know, 10 West, right, our rental property there, we have a septic system that eventually we're gonna have to deal with. Plus, it's a property that we rent out, so if anything breaks like it did last year, we have to figure out how we're gonna pay for it. So one of the nice things we could do is actually amend our current revolving fund, to create a provision that says, okay, so when we have these rental lease properties, the money we collect in can stay in this account until we need it to expend to improve or make maintenance or repairs to that property. So it's a whole whopping $4,000 a year. So we'd be reducing our general fund revenues by $4,000 a year, but it would allow us to build that money over time. So when we do get to the point where we need a septic, at this point, if it's a couple years out, we're still gonna have to supplement the money, but at least we have something to start with. And it sets us up so if, we ever have more properties or what have you, we have the ability to put the money somewhere and be thoughtful about what to do with it. So that's my suggestion. Again, I would say it's beneficial to do now rather than annual, because we would adjust the budget accordingly, and in order to do it, you have to then set how much money you're gonna raise max, how much money you're gonna expend max at the annual town meeting with the rest of the articles. So this is when I would do this article. Questions?
I think it's a good idea. I brought it to the board's attention several years ago that
Yep.
we've got a problem there. So I don't think we'll ever make enough money in that account to replace it, but at least we've got a starting point.
Right.
At least there's a spot to put the money somewhere.
Yep.
So we're building towards some, or even if it's a small thing, like what was last year, the boiler, or whatever it was.
Yeah.
We can at least have money we can pull from there instead of having to find creative locations.
Right.
And do we really want to get in the business of owning rental property?
That's a whole nother ball of
Well,
wax.
yeah, that is another issue for another day.
I don't
Yeah.
think that's part of this article.
I mean, I'm just throwing that out there.
No, I agree.
you know.
We are at the moment, so,
Yeah.
but I think there's been discussion about changing that.
But I do think that it should be kind of kept as a separate entity and separate accounting and whatnot
Yep.
because of these reasons. Because if I owned a piece of rental property and I had X amount coming in and my mortgage on it was X amount,
Yep.
a certain percentage of that would go toward,
Maintenance. Yep.
maintenance.
And the nice thing about the revolving fund bylaw piece is adding this additional revolving fund, all it is another entry on the special revenue. So it's, one more thing to keep tabulated. But it's not extensive, there's not a lot to it. We have other ones, it just hangs out with its friends.
Yep.
It's kept separate already, so it's just where it's kept, so I don't think
Yeah.
it's a problem.
Yep.
But this would be kept separate and continue rolling.
Yes, I agree.
Yep. All right. So that was the last one, right?
Yes, I have no more unless someone wants to add them.
So with that, we'll need to vote on the articles. So I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the articles according to their intent and contingent on the approval and modification by council. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve them based on their intent and the modification by council.
I'll second that with what we've discussed tonight.
Yes, with what we've discussed
Correct.
tonight. Yep.
Inclusive of what we've discussed as we went through.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. I've got a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. And then can I get a motion to then close the warrant for the special town meeting to be held on November 20th, 2023?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Excellent. I have no correspondence. We just have now the town administrator's report.
Oh, that's me.
I hope so.
Well, making a note, running the Zoom piece, there's a lot of components going on over here. I don't have too many major updates. I don't even know if I need to pull this up. I'll just go through them pretty quick. One Stop Grant, unfortunately, the awards came out today. Governor announced them. They posted on the web. I sent it to the three of you, the link to the newspaper article. You could check out who got awarded. We were not one of those towns. Remember, we had applied for West Street. We were not funded.
That's about the third time we've applied for funding for West Street.
Well, and we even used the consultant to put the material. I mean, that
We
was
did
our
last
best
year as
shot.
well. We used
Oh,
a
did we?
consultant. Yeah, we did.
I mean, that's our best shot, and the funds are very competitive. A good portion of the projects were housing this year because that's a priority for
That
the
is-
administration.
That is generally where it leads, and especially affordable housing, and we haven't got that.
Yep. So, I mean, it kind of is what it is on that. Other grants, so we did apply for the risk management grant through Maya, up to $10,000. We applied to get another trench box for the DPW. We currently have, I believe, 2 trench boxes, but they're not compatible. It's like having a Lego and a Mega Block. They're both blocks, but you can't stack them. So what happens when you get to certain places on West Street where we have a lot of our breaks, they're deeper going into the hole than one box is going to allow us to cover. And to be safe, we really need 2. But in order to be 2, they have to be compatible. So like 2 Legos or 2 Mega Blocks. So this grant, if awarded to us, would cover, I think, 10,000. I think the cost estimate we have is like 11. So we'd still have to come up with $1,000 or so, which I think we can figure out in expenses between water and DPW. But I just wanted to bring that up. So we did put that in. I think they said like 3 weeks is the turnaround time for that grant award. So we should be hearing pretty soon. They are first come, first served, so we did not want to wait. Other things here, so we already talked about those other pieces. The police department got the municipal road safety grant again this year, $19,648 from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. So they're going to do extra traffic enforcement, bike rodeo, and alcohol programs at the AMC. I'm not sure what alcohol programs at the AMC is. I don't think it means one-day liquor licenses, but I did not ask. So that's all we have for the grants. ADA grant should be out by Thanksgiving, I was told. So we'll see how we did on that one. We put in pretty much the same. We modified a couple things, added more support documents than we had last year, so hopefully that will be helpful.
Yeah, I think it's successful.
And then the last piece, just Black Hill Bridge grant. So you remember that is the study that we had through DOT, conversations with DOT. They'd like to change direction, so we're working with legal right now to see if we can exit the contract with CHA. And then what would happen is Mass DOT would manage the rest of the project through in-house, having whatever consultant they have, but they would deal with the reimbursement, they would deal with project management, they would deal with getting us to the end result. We're just having some trouble with our current consultant getting us to where we need to be. We've already had 2 extensions. So we're hopeful that we can resolve that amicably and separate ways and move forward. So that's the only update I have on that. Other than that, I don't have too many updates. We do have a new mechanic, temporary mechanic / heavy equipment operator. Keith, thank you. I'm having so much trouble remembering the poor gentleman's name. Keith started, I think, about 3 weeks ago. So he seems to be doing well. Everything's going okay.
Good.
And we're still working towards next steps for that department. We'll continue doing so. And that is, I think, all let's see, other things. I did do the zoning steering committee last night. Sorry. I know there's only 3 days in the week so far, but there's been a lot of meetings. So that was last evening with CMRPC. So we reviewed a little bit more of the MBTA zoning bylaw draft. as this board was gracious enough to give us the ability to meet in this room, assuming that the 21st of November is still available and has not been occupied by another training, we will be doing the public information session here on the 21st, and I don't remember if we said 6:30 or 7, I have to look it up. And the idea is to, also invite any of the potential land owners that, might have a location that's in part of the potential range for the bylaw, so that they're there as well, and then public questions and so forth. And that way we can modify anything we need to modify, and then it would go to the planning board and so forth. And again, the ultimate goal, because we're gonna have a lot of these bylaws, not just MBTA, but the zoning bylaws, is to have a page on our website so that you have a video of the info clip and then a video segment of the planning board hearing. Not the whole planning board meeting, that's too much. Just the segment, so that before we go to town meeting, we can make sure we advise to folks, whether it's annual or special town meeting after the annual, right? To go check out information, so if they have questions, they can grab the information packet here, they can grab the bylaw here, they can, look at that informational section and so forth. So we do anticipate that the MBTA one is going to generate a lot of questions and dialogue back and forth.
Yeah.
And one of the pieces of information I was asked to even put together by the steering committee was actually looking at, one of the bites of the law is actually that they can withhold state funding from us. So including Chapter 90 and, formula grant, any other state grants, they would hold. And we have, I think, until 2025 to get it going.
Right.
We wanted to start early because A, we had funding, and B, we wanted to get going because we expect that this might be one of those bylaws that has to hit town meeting a couple times.
Yep.
For us to make adjustments to get everyone comfortable and understanding what's going on and so forth. Aside from that, we're working on the Section 1 definitions. We went through last night. We have a couple to have further discussion on. And then the next meeting, which will be we're going to meet again, I think, in December, we'll be looking at Sections 2 and 3. So we are making progress on those pieces. Again, the funding for that project runs out on June 30th. So we want to make sure we're moving, keeping everyone on board, and then, any changes we need to make, we're making along the way.
How do we know when the next meeting is, and where is that, all that?
So the steering committee meeting, remember, it's not public, because it's just kind of like a working group. We're just trying to move it forward and kind of help CMRPC cultivate with the viewpoints from a representative from EDC and planning board and zoning board and building commissioner and as needed Travis from DPW and so forth.
Right.
Try to keep those pieces moving, but it will start hitting the docket on the planning board over the next couple of months because they have to hold public hearings
Right.
for the zoning bylaws. So those pieces will be well publicized, and we're gonna try our best to do public information sessions in advance too. So once we get a picture of what we think we're looking at, we hashed out enough of the details, and we'll put it to the public information session so folks know about it. And then any changes to that will go to the planning board, and then they'll have a public hearing.
Okay.
So there's plenty of opportunity for people to participate. We're just trying to get buy-in and feedback from the relevant experts in the field to make sure that we're not doing something and then all of a sudden EDC's like, what are you doing? You're hurting economic development, or planning board, no, you can't do that, or zoning, what are you doing? So,
Okay.
yes. All right, and that's, I think, was that all my meetings? I think so. Oh, and Cheryl and I did meet with the inspectors on Monday, plumbing, gas, and electrical, just to review how we're doing with permits and costs and so forth. Because one of the biggest concerns, remember this year, we changed it to a $50 flat fee for both. Seems to be working out well. Both folks are being compensated and have received more compensation